Thank you very much for that very kind introduction, Anand. You know, you never know how to prepare for this speech, and oftentimes you really don't know who the audience is. So I have found myself in that type of situation, not knowing whether you're speaking to business folks, you're speaking to professors, you're speaking to students. But one thing is common: whosoever you're speaking to, they all live in a global world. And I think the setup today was that he'll provide you the 30,000 feet view. It feels that way. I feel that I continue to live at that 30,000 feet stratosphere. And to explain to you or bring home the point how global this world is and how critical global is to us, I just need to look at my itinerary. It was 4 days or 5 days ago. We came back from an 18-day trip across 5 countries in Asia, essentially in the ASEAN region. We started in Taiwan and we finished in Indonesia and Singapore. To keep my 30-year marriage going, I did meet my wife over the weekend. And now I find myself embarking on another 3-week trip to 5 other countries in Asia. Interestingly, some of them were referenced today. We will take 21 universities, and I was wondering why Maryland was not there, on our education trade mission to India. From there, we go on to an aerospace trade mission in Korea, and then I lead a mining and coal trade mission in Mongolia and China. I think this happens not because one has a travel lust, and certainly if you've been like me, working for the last 18 years, putting in much more than 15 days every month in international travel, the last thing you want to see is an airplane. And yet we find ourselves not to be too big of ourselves, not to be too full of ourselves. And, you know, I ran global businesses for major American organizations, including Warner Lambert, Pfizer, and Johnson & Johnson. And gone are the days when you could look and say, these were strategies which we developed in the United States, and that's what we're going to globalize. Globalization is building something bottoms up. So as you can see now that I've deviated to my colleague Ryan's chagrin completely from the speech, because you got me into my favorite topic called globalization. I did want to reflect on a couple of things. You know, we are the global gypsies. My family and I have called 6 countries home. We know that we will, my passport has me going across 140 countries at some point in time. And I've seen those changes. When you live and work in businesses in a country, you invariably get into a place and say, this is nuts. These guys just don't get it. And you try to change the country to what you need to do. 6 months later, you say, there's some method to madness in some of the things they do. And that's evolution. And globalization, if you just reflect for a second, has evolved pretty much that way for American corporations. It was in the late 89 that I came from Canada. I used to run the Canadian business. To globalize Listerine, nothing so sexy, but just Listerine. And we had done that. We'd introduced what you now see on your shelves. It used to be in this awful-looking, khaki overwrapped glass bottle, and if you put it into your mouth and the label said, keep it in your mouth for 30 seconds, how the hell you could tolerate that intensity for 30 seconds was an issue. Since then, we've moved into these beautiful colored, flavored mouthwashes. We moved into what is called pocket packs. It's a strip which you dissolve in your mouth. Actually, it was tickled when Time magazine picked up what I'd done to say this was one of the top 100 inventions that year, not realizing it was walking through the aisle in Taiwan in a drugstore where I found a candy product. And we said, gee, this would be a great form if we could impregnate it with Listerine ingredients and sell it to the world. That's what we did, and so much for innovation. I don't want to talk to you about the connectedness, because it doesn't matter where the innovation starts, doesn't matter what it is, we are in a connected go. And in as much as we do not have the arrogance that everything happens here and we are the focal point of all innovation, I think we're okay. But this is how the world has evolved. when I moved first into international marketing from country operations, we were looking at a triad of countries. That was the extent of our globalization, which was North America, Europe, and Japan. What did they have in common? All they had in common was that they were developed markets, they were richer countries, and we decided that we're going to do every strategy now, just not North America, but we'll involve the rich countries, and may the products go the way they do. Of course, we didn't realize that there are two islands or beacons called Singapore and Hong Kong, which both have a per capita income higher than those other countries we talked about. And you can go on and on in terms of just the orientation, but we had moved from being singularly focused on one market, possibly two markets, because we always thought Canada was the 53rd state, or whatever you wanted to call it. The issue is we had moved to this triad orientation. That wasn't global. And today the conversation is all about the emerging markets and the growth. And I often characterize this and say, hey, if we could have between 8 and 10% growth here or in any of the Western countries, we would rule. The Indias, the Chinas, and the Brazils have every right to be proud. They have no reason to be arrogant or feisty. And that's where policy, which I never knew, because I was a simple business guy coming from the business world and find myself really engaging, because execution happens at the business side, but you really have to start looking at how to manage policies. So we moved from triad and we became multi-local. We set up factories in different places. The Brits, the Portuguese, the Dutch, they were all the colonial leaders. They were always multi-local. They had operations in different countries. Everyone had their own plant. Everyone had their own flavors and products. And actually, when I ran the confectionery business of Adams, which is a part of went from us to Cadbury to Kraft, there were 42 different flavors of orange. How many oranges are there in this world? And if you picked up a Halls with orange flavored, you had 42 different orange, and that was a function of being multi-local. The world moved from multi-local to really become multinational. And it was still not global. You were looking at a bunch of countries. You were looking at, for your own efficiencies, not having a manufacturing plant in every place, having it in a few places. And that was the evolution. And today, we talk about global. So having set that up as a stage and hopefully given Ryan some heart attacks here, because we do need to get out at 10 just like you, I will get back to what we originally intended to speak to you. I want to thank the University of Maryland and Pat Stoker and the Robert H. Smith School of Business Center for making this happen. I think conversations such as this is extremely important because it allows people to be convened and hopefully through the process fosters different views which we can get to in a Q&A session. But if you look at what this administration is doing and is committed to do, we are working with businesses and industry, academia and nonprofits, state and local governments, and with chambers of commerce, World Trade Centers, and trade associations to really get our economy firing on all cylinders again, to grow businesses and exports, and to create well-paying jobs. The fact of the matter is trade is a two-way street, and much as I get up and talk about the NEI and what the National Export Initiative is in this country, in the course of my travels, it is very necessary for me to look at it from the other side and speak to countries I engage with in terms of the value of trade and what is in it for them as they engage with the USFA. And I'm particularly delighted at a couple of things we've been able to achieve. It may seem small, never got the press, but it's huge. The Hong Kong government, which is a sovereign government, signed what we call the PBI, which is a Memorandum of Understanding with me, the Pacific Bridge Initiative, which is really to work, engage, and move forward the American President's National Export Initiative. That's huge. The same thing we were able to establish last week when we were in Singapore. Again, to get that sovereign government of Singapore and their equivalent of our trade promotion service to agree to promote U.S. businesses. Now, it's a quid pro quo, whether it's cross-promotion, whether it is publicizing what happens in Singapore, we too will play that part. But increasingly, we are coming to realize that collaboration is almost an innovation. Why, as we look at innovation, we looked at product innovation, we looked at service innovation. This is, I would say, virtually a cultural innovation. Beyond collaboration, though, jumpstarting our economy will require leadership and changing the way we do things. To win the future, we need to out-innovate, out-educate, and out-build the rest of the world. We must work together to create opportunities that encourage innovation and spur growth. We must produce innovative products and technologies, and we must educate and train our workers and our students to enable us to scale new technologies. Throughout the United States, the Obama administration has committed resources to improving education and to infrastructure projects such as electric grids and highways. When we have innovated, we have prevailed, and the world has benefited. That is why this administration places so much emphasis on innovation, on building and owning the markets of tomorrow, even as we vigorously compete for market share in today's markets. American products, services, and technologies do improve lives and livelihoods globally. This is the reason why consumers around the world value a product that is made in the USA more than one made anywhere else, and why we must connect our exporters with buyers worldwide. When U.S. businesses export, jobs are created here at home, and also in the countries that we export to. So let me give you the example of a solar panel. It could be engineered here, it could be developed here, but when we export it, it is through a distribution arrangement with a distributor or wholesaler or even a joint venture partner in a different country. Those panels are distributed, installed, and maintained by local people of that country, creating employment in that country. And that's the virtuous cycle we need to work to. America is at its best when it's inventive. Our inventions gave the world mobility. It gave the world the motor car and the airplane. It gave the world connectivity. It gave the world the computer, the internet, and also the GPS. And yes, there is an inventor of the internet. And do you know who it is? Many a time, and that's many a time, people attribute inventions, innovations to an individual, and oftentimes it's right. I can't help reflect the fact that I was pained to hear that Steve Jobs passed away today, and if he is not an icon of American innovation, what is? And if what I'm speaking to you is not a conundrum of how we deal with that innovation, what's right or wrong in policy, I have an iPad in front of me. I will not allow this to be promoted by my team. This is an iconoclastic American brand, but much more than 50% of this is manufactured elsewhere. When my goal and my president's marching orders to me are to double exports and create jobs in this country, that cannot be promoted by that service. But it in no shape, form diminishes the fact that it's an extraordinarily innovative product, and it is an American icon. So when you look at innovation and the commercial execution of innovation and how it frames up with policy, these are the things we deal with. The internet and the GPS were not developed by an individual, but a group of individuals, and were not developed by the private sector, but in the labs of the Department of Defense. They were commercialized through public-private partnerships and eventually by the private sector. And that's the strength of collaboration, and that's what we need to encourage, even as we stimulate private sector innovation. We're doing that. Will we get it right all the time? Nobody, you look at the stock market, look at anything, not every project we invest in will fail, will win. And if we are afraid to fail, we will never succeed. So I think the ability to take risks, the ability to see the future, the ability to work and leverage our very culture, which is at the core of what we are, and encourage American entrepreneurship and risk-taking is very essential. This administration certainly believes that. It is committed to laying the foundation for future success through policy mechanisms such as an R&D tax credit that spurs innovation and creates employment, and others that influence common standards, increase predictability, and reduce risk. Essentially, that's what business wants. Whether you look at solar, wind, there are competing technologies, and that's the nature of evolution. Evolution has never been clean. Neither has birth. So as you move towards different standards, different protocols working, you also at some stage need convergence, which is to move towards common standards. And that's exactly what the administration has tried to do, not only amongst and between ourselves, not only between businesses, but getting regulators, businesses, and different countries to work together. For example, through NIST, which is a Department of Commerce agency, to come up with common standards for the grid. It is how U.S. companies and our products can reach the 95% of our consumers who live outside the United States. Now, again, I'm desperately off different, speaking on dual tracking my conversations here, but when you look at it, America was fortunate. We were incredibly fortunate because we had a huge market in our backyard. We had systems pertaining to risk which are well addressed. If a major company like Johnson & Johnson, which I'm familiar with, shipped to Walmart, we were paid electronically. We didn't need to worry about systems and so on and so forth. You were then asking a group of entrepreneurs to go beyond the safe markets, the safe, big, profitable market of the United States, to explore and engage in the potential markets of tomorrow. That was a discomfort. Culturally, when you look at it, the Brits, the Portuguese, the Dutch, all of them, you can argue, were more multinational than us. And there's a reason why. Their domestic markets were small. They needed to look at markets beyond. All of them were colonial powers. All of them consequently had well-developed mercantilism, and they were traders. So it's no surprise, even though you can spin this different ways, it's no surprise that when you look at exports as a percentage of our GDP, we did extraordinarily well last year. I'm incredibly proud of the service I lead. We used to be 11.2% of the world's biggest economy, $14 trillion. 11.2% of that GDP came from exports. In 2010, we were able to move that from 11.2 to 12.5%. I think that's an incredible achievement. We also had the second biggest export in the history of what we did. History of the United States ever, 1.83 trillion. Those were outstanding figures when you look at the economy being where it was. And for every $1 invested in the U.S. and foreign commercial service, we returned in terms of touched, facilitated exports, not macro exports, $135 to the American taxpayer. That's the way we've chosen to manage to look at what is going to be our ROI. Though unofficial, we are trending well close to 200 at this point in time in terms of return. And I'm pretty sure if we are not the most efficient organization in the U.S. government system, we're pretty close right there at the top. But as we move from 11.2% to 12.5%, we shouldn't get too full of ourselves. Exports as a percentage of China's GDP is 25%. As a percentage of Canada's GDP is 30%. As a percentage of most of European GDPs is in the mid-30s, and Germany does more than 40%. So what globalization are we talking about? What opportunities? Opportunities of 95% of demographically looking at it consumers. We're looking at a younger population for the most part as we look outside. We're looking at it as a percentage of macroeconomics on GDP percentages. We must engage. And consequently, when people ask me from time to time, what is it that is the NEI? Is this a bumper sticker? Is it a slogan? Is doubling exports doable? It's kind of a nice slogan. And I say, oh, heck no. I've given you sufficient facts and numbers to say it is doable. It is morally the right thing to do if we need to continue to look at creating further competitiveness for the U.S. and also to create the jobs necessary to grow prosperity worldwide. So I think if you look at what the administration has done from R&D credits to encouraging businesses to continue to invest and have the entire investments in capital investment and R&D written off, these are moves which are deliberately put in place so that we can spur innovation. Simultaneously, on the policy side, we have conversations ongoing with our partners to resist the temptation of specifying local content or indigenous innovation. We've run into that both in India and China, which is to say, well, we would love to take your product, and every American company will export if everyone had a guarantee that their intellectual property will be protected. So first, as we look at protection of intellectual property, and thereafter, as we look at working with people to say that there is a thin line. If you move that slope, if you go on that slope, which is to look for indigenous innovation, then you're inevitably going to stifle innovation, not create it. And in the end, it is less about the companies which sell. And it's the old saying. If you've heard it, the founder of Revlon used to say, in the factories we manufacture cosmetics, in the markets we sell hope. So as you look at these products, we manufacture, but those who buy only if there's a reason to buy. And we do know that the products, whether they're capital goods, whether the machines from here, are imported by China or in India, which they use to manufacture and convert commodities and other such products, and re-export to the world. That's how the virtuous cycle of commercial economics is created. So we can look at any number of ways, but we say, hey, innovation needs to be spurred, needs to be respected, intellectual property needs to be respected. If you do that, then your countries will have access to the products, the services, and the technologies which improve lives and livelihoods. Now, I would like to talk of one theme before I'll wrap up in the interest of Anand's time and my not being Cinderella for my flight, and also have some time for question and answers. As we look at it, I want to talk to you about big words. Macroeconomic rebalancing. You will find this, these words are used, and if you have not, let alone go to school at a good school like Maryland, but probably not done your PhD from there, it's very difficult to comprehend what these words mean. So let me make this as simple as possible. This is a theme which the U.S. has been speaking and trying to convince and influence our other 19 partners on the G20. And it is this: do not look for the United States alone to be the consumption market. The flip side of the logic being 5% of the world's consumers can't absorb the world's entire production. It doesn't make sense. And you have a moral responsibility in your own selves to uplift your own middle class. And how do you do that? Your monetary and your fiscal policies need to be such that it improves the well-being of your middle class. And if you do that, then it starts the creation of a consumption market and consumers in your own economy. And if you do believe in globalization, the benefits of globalization, and you want those technologies, products, and services, then simultaneously with that, what you need to do is also drop the barriers to trade and put in place mechanisms which will spur innovation so that the world as a whole can gain. So what's happened? The supply of money and the well-being of its own population does improve in each of these countries. Reduced barriers opens the markets for U.S. products too. And when we have that free and fair trade, which we all want, then there is global prosperity. So I'm going to stop. It's 10 minutes to 10. It still gives us minimally 10 minutes for question, and maybe we'll take one after 10 minutes. So thank you very much for having me, and hopefully this was not too pedantic a lecture.
I have a question. So while I was driving here on NPR, I heard that, and I should have been in touch with this, but that the Congress is trying to pass a law or proclamation or whatever you may call it, asking China to change its exchange rates. I mean, how does that, you don't have to give the administration's point of view here, but how does that, kind of tally with your concept of, especially the last things you said about globalization?
You know, I've never been good at caveating that deans are not allowed to ask questions. So let me preface this with a story, and yes, it's ducking the question. I was in Paris. I was doing what's called a near live interview, which basically is that you don't have much retraction by the time you finish your interview. They're just about to air it. And I had asked the guy, what would you like to speak on? And he said something. I said, look, there's only one element I don't want to speak on, and that's currency. And that's because there are only two people empowered to do that, the President of the United States and the Secretary of Treasury. And I did mention to him that in a different life, I had spent 17 years in the media. So I said, look, it's your program, but I will tap dance just as well, and if not better than you. So don't go there. It would just screw up your program. Well, everything went like clockwork. And at the end of 7.5 minutes, the guy says, Secretary Kumar, Secretary Geithner is in Beijing. What do you think they're talking about? So I looked at him and said, as you well know, I'm here with you in Paris. I have no idea what they're talking about. So he, persistent as he was, he says, well, but surely you would be briefed on the currencies. So I said, yes, when I get back, I'm sure I will be briefed. As for now, I know exactly what you know. So with respect to currency, with that preamble, there could be any number of repercussions. I think the U.S. position has always been this. We let market forces decide what currency or anything should be. And any interference with market forces sets ourselves to creating disequilibrium, which can have any number of effects. So I think the larger theme, the conceptual theme, is that now as to what will happen in Congress, and we've all seen what Congress has been doing over the last little while. I don't even want to speculate. But the other side of it is, on a very positive note, what's not lost on me, the person who coerced me to come here, and I think the world of her was, she serves on your faculty. Susan Schwab was my predecessor and continues to be a good friend. And she has many a scar to go through in terms of making market forces take hold and cutting deals. I think eventually we are seeing something very positive. The president did table 3 free trade agreements to Congress. We are very confident that they will move through, along with the safety protections which need to be in any such free trade agreements which we envision. And that is the TAA, the Trade Adjustment Allowance, which is to make sure that in the unlikely event any worker is adversely affected by trade, then we owe it to them to at least retrain those workers so that they could be productively employed in time. it is, again, the right thing to do. As we look at unemployment at 9.1%, that's where we go. So I think trade is a multifaceted game. I think we're talking about. So yes, I ducked the question, but I gave you some platitudes.
That was a good answer.
Yes, sir.
If you could comment, it's often been said that China has a minerals policy and we have a human rights policy. And they kind of get confused relative to the United States driving a political ideology in lieu of a trade policy. I was just wondering if you could comment on that and where the administration stands on that.
Well, if we look at business, and again, today is the day of pontification, let me first answer one of the things why I can't teach. I'd designed a program for Rutgers, put it together. It's a state school. I agreed to teach, to be told that I'm forbidden once I accept a federal position to teach. I then said, I will teach, whatever I get from it, I'll give to charity. I was said, that's not possible. Then I said, I'll teach free. But what happens is you leave someone in a lurch. But as I was exploring this, what occurred to me is the beauty or the advantages of schools in DC. I mean, business is multifaceted. Business is about making money. Business is about working and dealing with regulations as they are. Business is about doing right for the CEO and right for the worker. And I think that's the beauty of business. It always has been. So it never becomes an either-or solution. It's not whether we should have some regulations or we should have complete no regulations. I think looking at factors of production, which is where the mineral strategy, as you say, is the right one. It is a factor of production. So is labor. So is capital. So as we look at all the factors of production, the issue is how will it live in harmony? When we talk about a level playing field, that's what we say, hey, it should be the same standards. It's like a tender. When tenders are floated for public procurement so that everyone could be evaluated on the same basis. Should we say what should be the conditions of engagement? Now, I have worked 4 years in Africa in a different life when I stepped out of business world and did trying to establish all the learnings from business and convey it to the world of nonprofits with the goal of helping Africa feed itself. When I did that, I too saw standards. Roads are being built, people are going into mines, no hard hats, no shoes, no boots. Should we condone that? Should we let it float? Should we ask for a common ground in terms of standards? So I think the point was made, we'd like to see more Americans in Africa. You will see more Americans, you will see more Europeans, you will see more countries in Europe, as long as we work to common standards, I think. And that's the balance which you work towards in a mineral strategy or a human relations strategy, or at least having an equal playing field. Okay?
Okay, I think, Anna, do you want to?
Want to take one last question?
Okay.
Anybody has a last question?
Anyone?
Question?
Yeah.
Question. So, as context for this, whenever we have CEOs of smaller and medium-sized companies come in, they talk a lot about the importance of the Commerce Department's initiatives in helping them export. And I was wondering, in the current budgetary battles, how has that part of commerce?
You do know that I'm not allowed to lobby, right? Okay. But let me give you facts. The U.S. and Foreign Commercial Service has a statutory mandate to help small and medium enterprises. And I'm, again, incredibly proud of what we've been able to do over the last 18, 19 months. We ended last year serving 18,000 clients. 16,000 of them were small and medium enterprises. We helped them post 12,300 export successes. And as I looked at how do we help small and medium enterprises, we also focused what we do. There are 3 ways you can grow exports, not rocket science. You can help a company which is not exporting, to get into exporting. 30 million companies in the United States, 1% export, 280,000 companies. Shame on us. We got to do better. But I have trade specialists. I don't have educators. And much as I know what the skills are required, I wanted to divest myself of providing that education. I think someone else can look at that vector. The second way to do that, and by the way, to develop someone from scratch, on an average, median is 39 months. So with the 60-month runway my president gave me, there was no way I could hit those goals. The second way to increase exports is to take the 58% of exporters who export to only one market to go to a second market. That gestation period is much shorter, so I can get them in 9 months. That's what we did. We took 5,600 companies to discrete new market combinations. There's a third one, and I have sat on the fence and I can't afford to wait much longer, is help companies export more in the markets they're exporting to. I happen to believe, because of the very issue of budgets which you're talking about, that I need to be a catalyst, not a crutch. So if I continue to help the companies which are in one market, because by and large, businesses do it much better. You show them how to fish, they can fish. You don't need to keep on giving them a crutch. But also in a self-serving way, to extend my budget, go further. Because of the 280,000 exporters, I told you I served 18,000. I want to serve more than 18,000, and I cannot if I keep going back to the same well. So that's why my concentration needed to be in taking them to newer markets. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you that budgets have not been under strain. I think this country needs to get a balance between how much to invest in policy and how much to invest in execution. And I'll end on a quote which I particularly tickled me, and to the chagrin of my good friend Jeffrey Sachs, who I used it against, and he's never forgiven me since. Economists love humanity, but they hate human beings. I love policy, but I want to help American businesses today and through the course of this year. Thank you very much.